Hi, everyone, and welcome again to the second episode of the Live Well podcast, hosted by me, Jen Unwin, for Grow Health. I'm talking to some amazing people about how they've transformed their well-being and often that of many other people. I hope you enjoyed episode 1. So today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. David Unwin. No relative. No, actually, he is a relative, as you all know, of course. He's my husband. But more importantly than that, he's a low-carb GP. He's also, I think, the standing NHS Innovator of the Year, because they never voted for another one after after the time that he won it. And he's, we'll put in the notes, but he's got many other titles and achievements over the last 7 years. So, hello, David, in the next room.
Hello, Jen.
Thank you for
fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know lots of people love to hear you talk and hear what you're getting up to and what might be coming next. So, thank you so much for giving me your precious time.
No choice.
No choice. Yeah, exactly. So. My first question is always about, in a way, where people are heading, as you know, and this is something we often talk about, isn't it? Is what your best hopes are for any situation, really. But my question for you is, you definitely a man on a mission. I've noticed that, and I'm quite interested in asking you, in a way, what your 10 out of 10 is ultimately for this work that you're doing, helping people with type 2 diabetes and other conditions with low carb. What's your ultimate goal?
That's a great question, and I ought to think about it more often, Jen. Thinking now, I feel really sorry that at the moment in the world, so many people with type 2 diabetes are not given the chance of using an effective approach to their diabetes to avoid lifelong medication. Even in the UK, I suppose the majority of people are not given the option of the low carb diet, and I believe it's so effective that every person should be given the chance to see if it works for them. And that would be my 10 out of 10, that every person in the world who finds themselves with type 2 diabetes is given the chance to explore the difference a low carb diet would make. But actually, going beyond that, I suppose an even better thing would be if we could start reducing the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. So, you know that I've had in my own practice an 8-fold increase in the prevalence of type 2 diabetes since I started in 1986. So imagine if in the world the headline was obesity and type 2 diabetes in decline. Imagine it, Jen. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So those are mine. Now you ask me. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's great, and what amazing goals. So let's call that 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
You know how this goes.
I do.
Where are we now? Where are you now? If 10 out of 10 is that, and 0 out of 10 where is where obviously the complete opposite, that nobody ever hears about low carb and everybody's getting worse. There's kind of no hope for people with type 2 diabetes.
Where are we now? Let's say 3. Let's say 3. I'm trying really hard, and 3, I think, is where we are. In the internet means that through Twitter, through all various social media, actually millions of people now have heard about low carb, and there are a great many people doing it. So I think we're at 3, whereas and that would be true when you and I started in 2012, we were probably at a half, 0.5. There's just about nobody had heard about. Just a few wacky people had heard about it.
Yeah, 3. What else makes it? What else makes it 3?
Oh,
So
I see.
some people are doing it. What else have you noticed?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I know where at least 1 million people are who are doing it around the world. So that's quite a lot. Something I'm so proud of really is the teaspoon of sugar equivalent. These are the things I produce that show the glycemic consequences of different foods in terms of teaspoons of sugar. So I'm telling you, a bowl of rice affects your blood glucose to about the same extent as 10 teaspoons of sugar. So those form part of a set of 7 infograms, and they're now endorsed by NICE, a UK body that looks at quality. They're endorsed by NICE as suitable educational resources for people with type 2 diabetes. And that was an amazing thing that just happened last March. That definitely makes me a 3.
Yeah.
Do you want any more?
Yeah, what else? What else is going well already? Reasons to be cheerful.
Reasons to be cheerful. Well, I know in the UK that there are hundreds of GPs trying this now, and also there are groups doing it without doctors. And round the world, as you know, I've just been to Australia, and we went to Tel Aviv. We've been to the States. This is a global phenomenon, and people want to hear the message of hope. Yeah. So that, maybe actually I should say 4, and that's
that was my next question. Do you want to
maybe
revise?
I've been a bit, maybe I've been
a bit gloomy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
maybe,
4. Yeah.
4. I'm going up to 4 because when I think about it, we've made such a lot of progress, and then there's another one as well, isn't there? So I'm so proud the Royal College of General Practitioners have published an e-learning module that I've written, and that's free to every GP in the country, available to all 52,000 GPs in the UK.
Yeah.
So that would, it's a good, you're right. When you start thinking, we have actually made a bit more progress, maybe.
5, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a 5, And wait a minute, and there's more now. Certainly I was cheering, we were all cheering when the American Diabetes Association, they published a consensus report last year. And in that they said that there was the most evidence for low carbohydrate approaches to type 2 diabetes, so that we've gone all the way in 2013 where I'd be shouted at and told there was no evidence for this dangerous diet, to the American Diabetes Association saying there is the most evidence for this approach. So that was really significant for me, and I think gave many of us a safer feeling that what we were doing was backed up by important people. So I'm going right for the 5 now.
Are you going for 5 now? Yeah. And I'm just going to, that's great. And I'm just going to point out to the listeners actually that these kinds of questions I'm asking, the kinds of questions you can ask yourself about your own goals. And often when you actually stop and think, actually, where am I already? You can surprise yourself at how much you can kind of dig up that tells you that things are actually going better than you thought. It's a much more sort of positive way of looking at things, and human beings always tend to focus on the negative, so we always focus on how much more work there is to do. But it's good to stop, isn't it, and to think, actually, if you think in 7 years, you're right, how much the environment has changed. The information is out there for people. It's not everywhere, is it? But yeah, there has been a lot of progress.
And also it's interesting that the approach works, Jen, when I've known you for nearly all your life.
Yeah.
So that even though I know what you're doing, I'm even now thinking, oh, actually, and I've got 43,000 followers on Twitter. And that is amazing, isn't it? I know sort of
Yeah.
ordinary GP in Southbourne. That is quite a thing, and it's a good idea to occasionally count your blessings,
Just
which
to
I suppose
reflect.
yeah. So even though I know the tricks you're playing, it still works.
So to carry on with my normal trickeries, just it's reflecting, but it's sort of digging down into it, isn't it? And so my next question, of course, is how has that happened? What have you done? What have other people done? How is it that the world has got from 0.5 to 5 in 7 years? What have been the processes that we can, or you or other people can kind of carry on?
Okay, gosh, that's making me think again. I think the bedrock of this is that it works. And so for doctors like me, see the kind of cases on a weekly basis that I never saw ever before. And you just can't unsee that when people come in and they look terrific and they're so grateful and they're so lively and then the blood tests are better. I can't get it out of my head. It's so amazing. And I really look forward to it. I can't let it go. I think that's very powerful. And obviously doctors all over the world are having similar experiences, and that's rising exponentially. You can see it on Twitter, where now people are beginning to put graphs of success, stories of success, photos before and after. And that is really exciting and gives hope. I think the other thing is, so that from a doctor's point of view, you wish to be effective, and it's so
it works.
Exciting. Yeah, it's quite a surprise when you do things that really work, and then when they work again and again reliably. So now in my own practice, I think I've got 71 patients in drug-free remission of their diabetes, and I'm so proud of that. So that's one point. I think another one is from the individual's perspective. They feel so much better that they go around telling families and other people who say, well, you look terrific, what have you done? And that's happening all over the world. And so there's a sort of grassroots revolution to this, where people are so convinced individually that nothing a doctor or anybody else says talks them out of it, because they know they're feeling so well. So I think the fact it works reasonably quickly, the fact you feel so much better, I think it's very social media friendly. This is new, isn't it? Because if this had happened 40 years ago, how would the world ever have known?
Yeah.
Because it's happening now, and social media is everywhere, and the results are visible and social media friendly. And of course, the detail that you know, Jen, is that I didn't even approve of mobile phones. I was very old guy. I didn't approve of even the internet particularly, and social media and Twitter. And yet I can see that it has its risks, but also for a thing like this, I don't think we would ever have got to 5 without social media. So I think we're in a unique time in history.
Yeah.
In the threats to us, in terms of the obesogenic environment and the amount of sugar and starch we're all having. But luckily, we also have some potential through social media. So it's the first truly grassroots revolution in medicine that I'm aware of. And if you think, I actually learned from the people on the low carb forum, individuals who were helping themselves. And that was a doctor learning from ordinary people and waking up to what worked. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think stories are incredibly powerful to human beings, and every little, there's not little, but every amazing transformation that someone has, that either their doctor or themselves post on Twitter, is a little bit of inspiration for
Yes.
somebody else, and we've always said, haven't we, it's almost like a virus spreading, that you can
Yes.
catch you can catch that hopefulness, and then once people try it, as you say, it is so effective, both in terms of people noticing the numbers going in the right direction, but also losing weight, and I think even more importantly, that sense of well-being that people get. That has to be the ultimate, doesn't it? If you feel well and lively, it's invaluable. It's magic, and people like to keep.
Yeah.
They want to keep that feeling.
They do. So I think this idea of noticing what works, which is a thing you've taught me, Jen, really is so powerful. That instead of noticing when you're worse, which medicine is so hung up on, how bad is the pain, how depressed are you, actually noticing today's a good day, I wonder why that is. And in my case, it's often related to diet with my patients, is so powerful. And that as a tool, you can use it in all sorts of ways. I think it's very important. I'm beginning to think more now about maintenance of improvement. So many of my patients do well, but then after a while, carb creep comes in. And it's really important that we use these psychological tools to emphasize what's going well, but also to deal with, if you're on the drift, to pull you back to the things that were working, and remember how you feel when you're good, and thinking about how you would get back to weighing 12 stone or whatever weight you think might be good.
Yeah. Well, are there any other things you think that have made a difference? So what else has, or the things that you've done particularly that have moved the whole thing along? What are we all doing that's right, and that we might do more of to get further along?
Yeah. I think finding your tribe is really important. So when I was lonely at the very beginning, there was you and me, Jen, and we didn't really know anybody else.
Nobody. And in fact, most people were critical, in fact.
Yeah, there was a lot of criticism, and I felt really vulnerable as a GP doing this wacky thing. But again, social media makes it possible to find other people, and then you learn from each other, but you feel so supported. I'd say that because to an extent the low carb community has felt a little beleaguered at times, because we are attacked for what we do, that has the benefit of we're very kind to each other, very supportive. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful are the various either the groups you can join, the online groups, or going to conferences. I've loved going to the conferences. You can't believe how many hundreds of friends we've got, how many supportive people they are. And I remember the first public health collaboration conference that we did in Birmingham. And it was Trudy Deakin, wasn't it? She cried because she'd never before been in a room full of people who approved of what she did. It was such an emotional thing. And those, I think we're replicating that, the idea that we work together in a positive way and learn from each other. And we're doing it with private Google groups. We're replicating it with conferences in all sorts of ways. And then I've loved the group work that we do in the practice, because that's 7 years now, isn't it? And that's a thing that you made me do at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was odd, really, because we were forced to do it because we had no money. And yet what a gift it's been, because we have so many friends really in the low carb group in the practice, and patient experts, expert patients, I don't know which way it should be, anxious to help other people. And those evenings I've really enjoyed. It's unbelievable how our lives have changed some of it, I think, connects into what's good about being a human being, really. Having shared goals with a group of people, whether you're a rugby team or a low-carb group or a choir, I think that feels really good. And I think that's helped us. We've made a lot more progress. Each one of us punches above our weight because we're so well supported. I think our goals are good as well. We're not really motivated by making loads of money or anything. We are motivated by seeing people better.
Yep.
And those are true goals. And then when it happens, we're happy.
It's really, it's rewarding. I was going to ask what difference have you noticed personally? Has that been something that's kept you going? By personally adopting this lifestyle, what difference in your well-being have you noticed?
Oh, I see. Right.
And has that contributed to you keeping going as well, or having the strength to keep going?
Yes, I think it does, because on the whole so low carb, I have more energy and I need less sleep, about an hour and a half less sleep a day. So that's useful for a start off. And it means that sometimes when I'm doubting what I do or wonder if perhaps the critics that we have, they may be right, because you have to reflect, I was wrong before and I could be wrong again. But the fact that I personally feel so much healthier and I've lost weight and my blood pressure's better is so reassuring. Can it be wrong when I feel so much better? Or even I'm much calmer as a person and much less fretty. And that's been amazing, because it's enabled me to do the public speaking, the conferences, the radio work, and even television that would have been unthinkable to me 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, the fact it's worked for me personally underpins the confidence I need to face the world with this, as I think it does for many of us.
Okay, so 5 out of 10, and lots of good things happening for many reasons. And it sounds like that lots of those things kind of have a life of their own, don't they? Like you say, the social media, the fact that once somebody's discovered it, they feel so well, they're going to keep going. There's that sort of sense of momentum now. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
But what would be so if we're already 5, what would be 6, or what's the next thing that you'd notice that would give you confidence that the whole movement is going in the right direction? Or if you've got any what are your next sort of proximal goals, if you like? What's next for you? Because you're a very strategic person. Not everyone will know this, but I know that you're.
Now that don't tell them that.
You're thinking all the time about next steps. I'm just wondering if there's any you'd care to share.
Yeah. I think the idea that this is not just about diabetes is really important, so that I'm constantly trying to link what is happening in with the metabolic syndrome, so that I'm trying to point out that just as sugar and starchy carbohydrates are fueling type 2 diabetes, they're also fueling some other massive problems in worldwide health. Well, the first one, of course, is central obesity. So I'm constantly trying to get out the idea that insulin is pushing sugar into your belly, and that looking at this is a really sensible thing to do for central obesity, which itself, of course, is linked with 8 different cancers. So for me, the idea, I'm constantly trying to broaden this to help not just people with type 2 diabetes, but people with all sorts of other conditions. A few more. So we've talked about central obesity and the 8 different cancers that is causing to increase. I actually think fatty liver, it's incredible that, so we've got 20% of the whole of the developed world, and sometimes I'm told it's 25%. So at least a fifth of all the people we know have fatty liver, a problem. And I'm finding hundreds in the practice, and yet nobody hardly talks about it. So for me, far more awareness, because these are the early warning signs. These are the canaries in the mine that if you have fatty liver, you should take action. And I think it's a real worry that nobody screens for it really, and nobody is clear what to do about it. And yet I know it in my own practice that fatty liver responds very quickly to a low carbohydrate diet, very largely because, yet again, what's happening is insulin is pushing excess glucose into your liver, and it gets turned into fat there. So for me, 6 or 7 would be a broader appreciation of central obesity, fatty liver, and even the part that sugar and insulin and insulin resistance play in hypertension. So, you know, we wrote that paper last year, and that was all about the surprising improvements in blood pressure that people achieve when they go low carb, and that this again is linked with insulin causing sodium retention in the kidneys. So I'm trying really hard to help people around the world understand all sorts of other consequences of eating more sugar and starchy carbs than you really need. I think that's really worth our coordinated energy.
Yep.
I've probably got others as well, but that's enough for now.
That would be the main thing. Yeah. The food environment that people live in is just so unbelievable, isn't it? It's like the emperor's new clothes, and once you've seen it, you just can't unsee it. That there's just sugar everywhere, and sugar being part of every kind of occasion, meal out, celebration, and once you've seen it, it's so shocking. But I think a lot of people still think it's normal. to eat
Actually, I've got some. Sorry to interrupt, but your tricks are working again, because I'm thinking of other. Yes, I'm thinking. You know, the what else thing. I think this is beyond medicine, really, and we also need to think about planning. Every time we allow a sweet shop to appear near a school or a fast food outlet, what are the consequences of that? And that's been researched as well. So I think beyond planning, we need political will to help society. That none of us, we can't do this together. We need joining together with how do we plan our towns and cities? How do we live our lives? How can the politicians help us? How can the farmers help us?
Yeah.
So the idea of the sustainable production of healthy food, that's an international concern and very interesting. And as you know, I'm beginning to work with farmers and try and make friends and with farmers who are wanting to do a good job and produce nutritionally dense food in a sustainable way. So it's huge, really. I don't think, even if all the doctors did exactly as I did, we would still have a problem. We need society in general to think differently.
Yeah, it's looking at the root cause.
Yes, the actual cause
is too much sugar, but then one thing is each individual person sort of recognizing that and taking some action themselves, but that still leaves the kind of incoming problem of people who don't know that.
Yes, because of course we only deal with people on the whole when they're sick.
Yeah.
But what about schools? What about children?
Yeah.
And so really we should be thinking about prevention. effective prevention or public health on a huge international scale. In fact,
you and I both wish we'd known this decades ago, don't we?
Yes, I really do.
Yeah.
I'm ready for your next question.
The next question then is what's your sort of, because everybody's different, aren't they? What's your sort of personal prescription for keeping your own well-being? You obviously need a lot of energy to keep going at your great age. So
yeah. Is that a reminder that I'm 7 years older than you?
How do you?
I am, folks. I'm 7 years older.
What's your sort of personal formula for being at your best? It's just interesting to ask different people, because I know we all have different things that you know, if we don't do, or if we don't keep up with certain habits, we know we're not quite our best. So just tell the listeners how you keep yourself tip top.
In a friendly way, I never accept. I always think maybe I could do better. I've always got the idea that I could, even now, age 61, that I could be a better doctor. So that's not it's not to criticize myself, but to think that maybe I could be better and notice what things are working. And I suppose being married to you has really brought that about, this idea of potential. I'm really interested in the idea of it's quite exciting to think maybe I could do things better. But that needs a counterbalance, because it brings about the potential for me to over rev, because I don't relax easily. So I need to think about the balance of my life along the lines of, this isn't it's not a sprint, it's a long marathon that we're doing. You and I have been on at this now for 7 years. It's more than 7 years, and there's the potential for me to burn out on it. So that I need to balance my life with, as you know, singing in the choir. That helps. The grandchildren and my children, what fun. Or the work that I do with the conservation work I do is so different. Working in a wood or in a bird reserve it's so different to what I'm doing as a doctor. And I need to be careful that I do enough of those things so that I can carry on.
Yeah.
Obviously, the diet helps. The running. I love the runs, the ones that we do together, and then we have such a good chat. So all of these things, being grounded in society and noticing, I try and discipline myself not to be scrolling on Twitter, but to feed the hens and notice the weather or whatever. So I think on one hand, I'm driven by my goals and the potential to be better, and that is tempered by knowing myself, I hope, and trying to have what for me is a balanced existence. And then if I go off kilter, as I do at times, I end up overtired or something, try and do something about it. Will that do?
Yes, that's yes, very, very good. So sort of having other things that allow you to be sort of more, I suppose people would say, mindful and kind of in the moment and not goal focused all the time, allow you to sort of recharge so that you can go off and be goal focused again without burning out completely.
Having a little break. And I've learned it so much better now. I'm not the senior partner in the practice, so although I'm working there, that's improved my balance and I'm a bit fresher. Yoga has been a recent surprise. And I know, Jen, you told me for years that yoga was great.
Yeah.
And it does actually it is one way to achieve mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I know I get my best night's sleep. And of course, I'm saying publicly now, you were right, because you said people wouldn't laugh at me. And yeah, you were absolutely right. But it took you years to convince me to go.
Yeah.
Because I thought I'd be the only bloke and I'd be laughed at. And actually, The
Yeah.
only person that ever laughs at me in yoga is you, Jen.
Yes,
And you know that's true.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and
So,
that reminds me of another thing.
yeah.
I think, don't you think as we get older, it's important to have the capacity to laugh at yourself, and as you and I do, and not worry, not take ourselves too seriously. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So much of being a human being is essentially ridiculous,
Yeah. Yeah.
really. And as you
Yeah.
get older, I'm bald, I'm older, and I'm hilarious at yoga and a terrible dancer and all these things. But I think the ability to not take yourself too seriously is really important,
Mm.
because otherwise, when you get a knock, you can self-destruct.
Yeah.
And it's really, for me, sometimes things I do fail or don't go as I'd hoped. And I think one of the things I'm able to do is move on. I don't know, have you ever noticed that? Something you think is important to me, and I get a disappointment, but probably by the next day I've moved on. And that's, I'm not too heavily invested
Yeah.
in things that I can't be flexible and move on. I think that comes with the dyslexia and the sort of
Yeah.
untidy brain that I have.
And I think it's another way that hopeful people operate. They can always see several paths to the same goal. So your goals that you were talking about at the beginning, there's several possible paths, aren't there, and ways to get there. And what hopeful people tend to do is, even if one path becomes sort of obstructed or doesn't work, well, they just come up with another one. I think it's people who struggle are the ones who can't, try a different route, if you like.
Yeah,
Like
it's
this, like
I've noticed.
rerouting on the sat nav, if you like. They're just it's
Yeah,
important to keep trying other things, and then, as you say, noticing what works. I think that's one thing that we've
well,
tried to do.
I could illustrate that very well with my love of the wood, or the several woods that I'm planting. So recently I discovered that every one of the silver birch that I loved and planted about 10 years ago was dying. And that was so depressing, because I've loved those trees and they're beautiful, and now they're all dead. But within about 3 days, I was able to think, well, actually, that's a gap and a potential for planting some other, perhaps more interesting trees. So I still have the goal of a good wood.
Yeah.
And the fact that the silver birch are all dead, although disappointing, isn't the end of my goal of a wood.
Yeah.
And that within it are some opportunities. And as you saw, pretty quickly, rather than looking at the dead trees and being miserable,
Yeah.
I'm in there planting some different ones.
Yeah.
And the sadness that I have, I've been able to move on, and that's happened numerous times in my life.
Yeah.
Another one would be with the bird sanctuary, because that I ran a bird hospital, and then that we were running out of money, and we fell foul of zoo licensing or whatever that was. But actually, that then became the groundwork for planting all these reserves. So we're no longer a bird hospital, but we now have reserves, 6, I think, in the UK. So that sometimes a
setback
setback is the beginning of an opportunity.
Is an opportunity.
And I think you've helped me with that, Jen, where you've helped me understand that change isn't always bad, and that within change is opportunity. And when you first met me, I wasn't very good at that, was I?
Not so good.
Not so good. And
So
I think it's good that I'm older, but I now can see more often that change isn't always a threat.
Don't panic. Don't panic.
Don't panic.
So coming towards the end, I'd like to ask people: Is there one person's you'd like to thank, or one person's work who you think really helped you along the way to achieve the things that you've achieved, or that made a massive difference to you, either in your own personal well-being or just generally in what you've learned?
Is that apart from you, Jen?
Apart from me. We all know I'm the first.
You are, and of course I owe it all to you.
Of course.
I do think the solution-focused thing has been key. I do think your help with group work, the idea of focusing on patients' goals and hopes is so key, and I owe all of that to you. What a difference that has made. It's changed my practice to being hopeful, and it's part of how I'm still in there now, doing 10-minute appointments. And when you think I was really due to go 7 years ago, so really I'd have to say that your solution-focused approach has made a massive difference to me. But there's a couple of other people. I think, the senior partner in the practice, Phil Harrison, who cared for me as a baby doctor and allowed me to grow. And he awoke in me the idea that what we do in medicine isn't always the best thing. That maybe that what is fashionable now won't be fashionable in 30 years. And he was the very first person that enabled me to think out of the box about medicine and healthy skepticism for what I do, and bear in mind, the idea that 50% of what we do is probably rubbish, but we don't know which 50% it is. And I owe that to Phil Harrison, who is still alive now, age 91, and I see him and he's still riding a bike. So Phil Harrison, thank you. I think John Briffer, Dr. John Briffer, you and I read his book. Was it called The Diet Trap?
Escape the Diet Trap.
Escape the Diet Trap. I owe so much to John Briffer, and in around 2012, he put in so much spade work that I benefited from. And then probably Finney and Volek, really. We stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we? And I think the research they did, so in an environment where they weren't thanked for their work. And then the final one is Wolfgang Lutz, Dr. Wolfgang Lutz. And he's been dead for many years, but he wrote a book, Life Without Bread. When I read his book, it was like having a friend. It's like having a grandpa supporting me, an old friend. And that book meant such a lot to me. So he was doing low carb in Central Europe as a general physician for 30 years and keeping meticulous records and notes, and then wrote it up. And I have learned also that keeping records of what we do, although it seems tedious, as the years go by, those records become a very precious thing and worth all the time. I could go on and on thanking people. I like thanking people, but probably there'll be loads. How about the patients that have been so lovely to me? How about all the people on Twitter? How about anybody that can be bothered to watch this thing?
Yeah, thanks for watching.
How about them? If you're still listening now, I can never believe that anybody would be bothered. But I'm surrounded by people I should thank, really.
Yeah.
My mother.
Yeah.
Let's not forget Grandma. I think the idea.
This is getting like the Golden Globes.
It is. I'll make this my last one. But I think the idea, she had the idea of gratitude and being grateful, and how you become old and accept things, and the idea of gratitude. And I'm trying to cultivate that. I'll stop now.
No, I think it's.
Stop.
I think there's loads of evidence for it, isn't there? There's loads of evidence that those of us that can think of lots of reasons to be grateful. On the whole, your well-being will be higher. So it is a very good thing to cultivate. Evidence will show that. Okay, so my very last question would be, I'm thinking about making this a kind of tag team podcast. So would you like to tag anybody that it would be interesting for me to talk to about any aspect of well-being, really, and the work that they're doing?
Right, I tag
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Joanne McCormack. I think, she's a GP in Warrington, not far from us. And she contacted me after we'd been doing this about 2 years and became one of the very first people who believed in the approach.
Mm.
What I like about Joanne is she's utterly professional in terms of her wish to help people, and she's gutsy. She's had to be gutsy, and she really is in her wish to help, particularly children and families with obesity. And I'd be interested to hear her podcast. She's a worthy tag team member.
Yes,
Joanne,
Joanne, I'll be in touch. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's precious like gold dust.
It is precious like gold dust, Jenny.
Not many people get this opportunity. So we're so grateful, and I hope people will comment below with any questions or feedback about the interview. So thank you so much.
Goodbye now. Thank you.